American foreign policy. You might love it, you might hate it, but you definitely can't ignore it. It affects pretty much everyone on the planet. But what's the logic behind it? Is there some kind of hidden playbook, a secret code to its actions on the world stage? Well, today, we're going to try and find out.
Okay, so let's get right into it. This is the central question for our whole explainer. Why does the US do what it does? It can seem so contradictory, right? One minute it's all about staying out of things, the next it's intervening everywhere. Sometimes it talks about high-minded ideals, other times it's just pure self-interest. Our goal here is to decode the strategy behind all the noise.
And to do that, we've broken it all down into 5 key parts. First, we're going to look at its really unlikely beginning. Then, how it forged an empire. After that, we'll map out the global chessboard as it is today. Then we'll peek into the next 100 years. And finally, we'll uncover the unchanging core principles that seem to drive everything.
So first up, an unlikely beginning. To really understand the American playbook, you have to go all the way back to page 1 and ask a simple question. How was this country even made? Because really, its origin story is unlike any other major power out there. I mean, think about the sheer abruptness here. Most nations, they evolve over thousands of years from native populations. The United States, though, it was basically a startup. It was created in a single moment, bam, 1776, by settlers from another country, Britain. This sudden birth on a huge, isolated continent, well, that's our very first clue to its strategic thinking.
All right, so let's move to the next big question. How did this brand new nation turn into a global empire? The answer isn't just about money or military might. Nope, it's about a foundational, almost geographical imperative.
And here it is. This is the core driver. The source material argues that from day one, America's #1 goal was defending its own homeland. So how do you defend a continent with 2 massive oceans on either side? Simple, you control them. This whole idea of geopolitical defense, dominating the Atlantic and Pacific to create this giant defensive moat, that is the key that unlocks its whole expansionist strategy. And look, this wasn't just a series of random events. It was a consistent strategy that played out over more than a century. First, the Monroe Doctrine basically told European powers to get out of America's backyard. Then you have things like the open door policy and self-determination, which chipped away at their influence everywhere else. And finally, after World War II, the US actively pushed for decolonization, which effectively took apart the old European empires and let America step right into that power vacuum. Which brings us to the modern era. The European empires are gone, and America is the sole superpower. So how does it manage this massive global system? Well, welcome to the global chessboard.
And just to get a sense of the scale of this chessboard, just look at this number. According to our source, the U.S. has a military presence in 177 countries. Let that sink in. No other nation in history has ever had a global footprint like that. And it's not just about fighting wars, it's about managing the entire global system.
So the crucial point is, none of this is random. The U.S. sorts the world into these strategic tiers. You've got your major rivals like Russia and China. The strategy there is containment. Then there are key regional powers like India. The idea is to befriend them and use them to balance out the region. Allies are split too. You have partners like NATO who help manage things, and others like Japan, who are under more direct U.S. leadership. It's a really sophisticated system for managing friends and enemies.
And a huge part of managing all this is using regional conflicts as levers of influence. By managing tensions, say, in Korea or between China and Taiwan, the U.S. keeps its role as the indispensable power. In the Middle East, it uses rivalries to stop any unified bloc from forming. And the ultimate nightmare, the key strategic goal, is to stop its major adversaries, Russia, China, and influential Islamic powers, from ever teaming up against it.
This all brings us to the future. With China rising so fast, the American-led system is facing its biggest challenge yet. So what's the game plan for the next 100 years?
To really understand the stakes here, we have to talk about something called the Thucydides trap. It's named after an ancient Greek historian, and it basically describes this super dangerous dynamic that happens when a rising power, like Sparta way back then or China today, threatens to overtake the ruling power, Athens or the United States. It's a historically explosive situation. And this is not just some academic theory. The numbers are, well, they're pretty sobering. Political scientist Graham Allison found that out of 15 similar cases in the last 500 years, 11 of them ended in all-out war.
History shows us that these moments are absolute flashpoints for major global conflict.
But you might be wondering, why is the rivalry with China seen as potentially more dangerous than the Cold War? Well, it boils down to this. The US and the Soviet Union, for all their bad blood, both grew up with the European rules of balancing power. They understood the game. But according to our source, neither the US nor China has any history of treating the other as an equal. And that, well, that dramatically increases the risk of a miscalculation that could lead straight to war.
Okay, so we've covered the past, the present, and the future. Now it's time for the final and most important part. What is the secret code? What are the core principles that tie all of this together?
The source we're looking at argues that our common understanding of U.S. foreign policy is often just wrong. We tend to think of it as a tug-of-war between idealism and realism, but the argument here is that it has always been about realism, the cold, hard pursuit of national interest. And that old idea that America was historically isolationist? The source says, no way. It's always been expansionist, first across its own continent and then across the oceans.
So here's the absolute key. What allows America to pursue these policies that seem so contradictory? It's this one master principle: American exceptionalism. This core belief that the United States is fundamentally different, special, and not subject to the same rules as everybody else. This single idea is powerful enough to justify anything. It can justify staying out of world affairs because we're too pure for the world, and it can justify intervening anywhere on Earth to spread our superior values. It provides the ultimate strategic flexibility.
And that brings us to our final thought. If American foreign policy isn't random at all, but is actually driven by this consistent, unchanging code based on geopolitical defense, national interest, and a deep belief in its own exceptionalism, then what does that mean for how the rest of the world should prepare for whatever comes next? That's definitely something to think about.